first of all, before we start, we can't ignore the fact that we've already been addressing what is going on in the Ukraine, and our thoughts and our prayers are with all the people of the Ukraine, and especially the Jewish community, and we hope this situation gets resolved. It will be very nice if by the time I finish today, we hear really good news, because yesterday was just horrific to watch.
Amen.
You know, it's just beyond, absolutely beyond.
The Ukrainian ambassador was at Prime Minister's question time today.
There are no words. I believe God knows what He's doing. He runs the world, but I'm struggling at the moment. I have to be very honest. I don't understand what is going on. But I'd like to dedicate today's learning in the memory of two special ladies who, one died 3 months ago, my mother-in-law, Boria Bas Shlomo, and the other one was my aunt. Her name was Yehudis Bas Meir, and I hope that their neshamos will have an aliyah in the merit of our learning. And we are talking specifically about women this week. Now, Parshas Pikudei is the end of the book of Shemos, and I love it in shul because we have chazak v'nis chazek. I absolutely love that. And even when we were in lockdown, I tried to go and stand at the outside minyanim because I just love the sound of the congregation coming together. And Parshas Pikudei is also about the congregation coming together because it's like the crescendo of the building and the setting up of the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. And the last few parshios, so Teruma and Tetzavet talk about the command to set up the Mishkan, and then we've got this little interruption about the golden calf, and then Vayakel Pikudei is like the actual, it is happening, it's like being carried out, and there are artisans who are making beautiful things, and it's tapestries, and it's gold, and it's handcrafted things. It's all very beautiful. And I was actually in Jerusalem this week, and on Sunday morning, I went to the Mishkan, Mishkan Haeidus, where they sort of set up every object that is in the sanctuary, what it would look like when the Beis Hamikdash gets rebuilt. And there's a lot of controversy. Some people say it's not in our hands and we shouldn't start building it, but they feel like, let's get on with it. As soon as the Messiah comes, we're ready. But apart from the people who work at Mishkan Haeidus and the people who are learning the Gemara, it's a bit I don't want to say not relevant to our lives, and a bit harder to find meaning when we think about, we're all good at knowing about dressing up a room or tablecloth and, gold, we're all good at gold and jewellery, all lovely, but it's a little bit hard to find the meaning and how is this relevant to our lives today. And what I'd like to do is look closely at just the first pasuk, and then we're going to go on a little journey, okay? So the first pasuk in this week's parsha is source 1 in your sheet. Eile Pikudei HaMishkan. These are the accounts, or the counting up, or the reckoning of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Mishkan Haeidus, the tabernacle of the testimony. Asher Pukad al pi Moshe, which was reckoned by the mouth or by the bidding of Moshe. Avodas Halavim, the work of the Levites, biyad Ithamar ben Aharon HaKohen, and it was done at the hands of Ithamar, the son of Aaron HaKohen. So that's a bit of an uneventful posuk, but I want to look at it very, very closely and sort of unpack it. So the first thing is, and it's not on your sheet, at the end, it says, at the last part of the pasuk, it says, it was done at Moshe's bidding by the hands of Ithamar, the son of Aaron HaKohen. It's not on your sheet, but the Midrash in Shemos Rabbah says to us, Hashem gave Moshe the instructions. At no point, to the best of my knowledge, did Hashem ever tell Moshe, you have to keep a reckoning. So why was a reckoning made? And why was this reckoning made by the hands of Ithamar, who is Moshe's nephew, his brother's son? And the Midrash tells us that even though Moshe was given the instructions and told what to do, he asked other people to, so to speak, audit what was going on. The verse doesn't say, the pasuk doesn't say, this is what Moshe wrote as the list of things that he spent the money on, because people donated gold and silver and fabric. And don't forget, you know, if you think about it, in antiquity, people didn't have coloured clothing because they had whatever the colour of the sheep or whatever it is they were wearing. They didn't have reds and pinks. I don't know if you know that in Brunei, the royal colour is yellow. And it's because it was only rich people could wear coloured fabrics, because you would never waste your money on dye if you didn't have the bare essentials. You just wouldn't be able to do that. But Moshe felt that he should be accountable to the people, and therefore he asked someone, so to speak, to be his auditor. And I just think that is so powerful, in that if people are involved in community money, there is always, even for Moshe, like, there may be a temptation to say, oh, you know what, I'll take that set of books home or something like that, or...
Yeah, but that he's beyond reproach. No one can say that you did this.
But that he himself, so to speak, made it that he would be beyond reproach by the fact someone, I know it was his nephew, he was not asked by Hashem to give a reckoning. He just didn't want to. And I just think that is so, just like in that first verse, like it was said, Al Pi Moshe. Moshe, so to speak, told Ithamar to do that, because one should never, if they are handling community funds, do it on their own. We should always have someone looking over our shoulder, because temptation is great, even for Moshe, and he never wanted anyone to say anything about him.
Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
yes.
Why is Moshe not called the priests if they're brothers?
Right, that is beyond the remit of today's class. Moshe actually was the very first high priest, and then afterwards Aharon and his family were given. It's a very complicated subject, and even perhaps Pinchas yet wasn't born, so perhaps he was born before the command that Aaron's descendants were given. But Moshe technically was the very first person who served in the temple, and it was given over to...
He was still a Kohen. He would still have the Kohen traditions and...
Okay, he was for the very first chunk of time. I think it was the first week Moshe worked in the temple, but then it was given to Aaron and his sons. And then they were from the tribe of Levi, because they were grandsons of Levi.
Yes.
But Moshe did not function as the Kohen, except Aaron and his children did. Okay, it's a very good question, but it's quite an interesting topic.
It says Moshe and then it says Aharon the priest. So
because he did function, if I'm not mistaken, he did function as the priest right at the beginning.
Yes.
In the but it is a complicated subject, and who is the priest and who isn't the priest, and perhaps it should have been the firstborns, and the firstborns lost the right to become the priests, which is why we have the idea of like perhaps Pidyon Haben, because everybody except the tribe of Levi was involved, all the men except the tribe of Levi were involved in the Eger HaZahav. Now in Parshas Pikudei, Vayakhel, the Torah goes into tremendous detail, and I'm not going to read the Hebrew, and I only gave a little chunk of it, but it says, for example, in source 2, all the gold that was used for the work in the sanctuary, 29 talents of and 730 shekels by the sanctuary weight. The silver was 100 talents. We've got everything is completely denominated. Everything is mentioned in massive detail. And I especially put that in the sheet to show you that it says here the sockets were made for this, and the socket, everything's mentioned, and it says how big everything was. But I wasn't going to put the whole 2 Parshas in there, but just to give you a bit of an idea. But also,
do you know what those weights are today?
There's a difference of opinion. But you can go to the Mishkan Haeidus and you can see the sizes. They have found things they found, and it says like what weights are. But there are different opinions. Even, for example, when you think about how much you have to drink on Seder night, or we say how much is the amount you're supposed to make Kiddush on, there's a difference of opinion. Dare I say there's a difference of opinion when it comes to an Eruv about what is considered to be the width that is acceptable or not acceptable. So there's some people have a very high and some people have a very low threshold. So it depends. So maybe when it comes to drinking wine on Seder night, you want to make sure you go with a low threshold. Anyway, some people want to go with a high threshold. I digress. In Shemos, in the Parsha of Kisisa, chapter 30, it's not on your sheet again, Moshe is commanded to say he has to make something called the Ki'ar Nechoshes, and that is called a copper basin, which was in the temple, and it wasn't part of the holy objects in the sanctuary, but it was made to use for the Kohanim to wash their hands. And I've got a little picture which I'll show you when I get up a little bit. I'll show you what it looks like. And the only commandment is as follows. You should make the nechoshes, the copper basin and its stand, so that they can wash, so that they can use it for washing. It's not on the sheet. And place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it. Let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet in it, and no further instructions. This is very strange, because everything else is measured in massive detail. It says, this has to be this length, this has to be this width, this has to be in, out, gold. Okay, that's just my little introduction. Rashi tells us when it comes to talking about the copper basin, he asks the following, he explains to us the following things. On this posuk, Ele Pikudei, these are the reckonings. Okay, so number 3 on your sheets, on the sheet. But Parshas Nimna Kol Mishkalei Nidvas HaMishkan. In this section, in Parshas Pikudei, we're going to speak about all the weights and all the things that were donated to the Mishkan. Kesef silver, Zohov gold, Nechoshes copper, Venimnu Kol Kelov L'chol Avodoso. And everything was counted and accounted for neatly, almost like he was like Mr. Accountant, with every I dotted and every T crossed. So what we spoke about before is Moshe took the personal responsibility. He was the one who told Ithamar to do it. Now why? Now the Midrash, and this is source 4 on your sheet, this is the Buba edition of Midrash Tanchuma, asks, why did Moshe make the reckoning? Now, we don't know where Midrash comes from exactly, but the fact is it says Al Pi Moshe, that Moshe, it was almost like Moshe's idea. Look at this Midrash. Why did Moshe have to make a reckoning? Because Hashem trusted him, and we have in Bamidbar Yud Beis Zion, Lo Kain Avdi Moshe B'chol Beisi Ne'emonhu. Hashem says in his Torah himself, with source 4, I trust Moshe implicitly. I'm absolutely fine with everything he does. So why did Moshe have to do a reckoning? Moshe Amar, Moshe said, Bo'u v'osu cheshbon. Let's make a reckoning. Let's make an audit. Why did he do that? Elo shoma Moshe Yisrael medabrim me'acharov. Moshe heard the Jewish people, so to speak, muttering under their breaths behind his back.
And he also, thinking that he also had the situation with the golden calf, where he went up and the people lost faith. So maybe he thought that he needs to be...
I know, but this is like people donated. By the way, the Mishkan is the best fundraising, charity, doubling, price match, whatever. They actually had to say stop. The Torah actually says, and they were told stop bringing things. Okay, best ever fundraising. Never happened ever before, probably never going to happen again. And he heard, this is what the Midrash tells us. Whether it's true, I don't know, but that's like an idea. Maybe he felt if I didn't give a full reckoning, this might have happened. Hayu omrim ra'at savar, look at Moshe's neck, which basically means, look, he's got like a nice chubby little neck there. Ra'ah shafokim, look at his thighs, okay? It basically means he looks like he's had lots of steak and caviar for dinner. Ohel Yehudim, he has been stocking up on food from what belongs to the Jewish people. Now, this has to be metaphorical because at this time they were in the desert and they were eating manna from heaven and nobody could take more and not. But the point is, the rabbis are telling us, why did Moshe do that? He never wanted someone to say, you've taken what doesn't belong to you. It doesn't mean it's literal, right? So it says, V'shoteh Mishel HaYehudim, he's drinking what belongs to us. V'chol ma sheyesh lo min HaYehudim, and all the things he has come from the Jews. He's taken our possessions, so to speak.
He is also a Jew, so why was he distinguished?
He wasn't drinking. He's saying he's taken what we donated to the Mishkan in good faith, and we can see suddenly Moshe's got curtains made out of that fabric that I just donated. Do you understand? It's not true. It doesn't mean it's true. It's like saying the Midrash is coming to look at the words in the verse and saying, why did Moshe do that? Because Moshe was not asked by God to give a reckoning. Why did he? And it even says, Al Pi Moshe, the source one. Okay, it was done at Moshe's bidding, by Moshe's mouth. He was the one who made the suggestion. And the Midrash looks at the words and almost like inserts, not a fairy tale, a way of us understanding, gives us a parable for us to understand. People would have something to complain about and say, hold on a minute, where do you get those curtains from? Why has he got so much money in his bank account? Now obviously it's for us to understand in a contemporary manner. When the rabbis told these stories, almost like they were telling sermons in shul, for us to understand what is going on here. It cannot be applicable to Moshe because they were eating manna in the desert. They were eating mon, so it can't be that. And no one had a bank account. And all the riches they had when they left Egypt. So it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to us to be able to understand something practical for our own lives, if you are ever, okay? And v'chavero meshivo, and his friend would like answer him back, Adam sheshalat al melechas hamishkan ein ata mevakesh sheyehei asher. Would you not want the person who's in charge of the work in the Mishkan to be wealthy? So this is Moshe, who had this sort of like, not prophetic, but he had an idea. I bet people are talking behind my back, asking, am I doing this properly? In order to prevent anybody, I want to be above suspicion. Kivan sheshama Moshe kach. So as soon as Moshe sort of heard this, but he never really actually heard this because nobody ever actually said it, but he's like, human nature is, I've got all the gold and silver, everybody's given me, I want to be above repute. I do not want anyone to be suspicious about my behavior. Kivan sheshama Moshe kach. As soon as Moshe heard this, Amar lahem, he said to them, Chayechem Mishkan nigmar, ani oseh imchem cheshbon. When I finished and I put up I'm going to show you what I did with every last ounce of gold. I don't want anyone to ever come up to me and say to me, you haven't done this correctly. Okay, everyone okay so far? Any questions?
Is there a division about what he keeps for himself and what he gives to the Mishkan? Because if he's making the reckoning after the event,
he's put everything in the Mishkan. The point is he didn't...
They're not already, but there's an opportunity for things to go missing.
But he's saying that everything was measured. Let's say he took in 100 kilos of gold. 100 kilos of gold were used in the Mishkan. This is the point. He didn't use any. He didn't misappropriate any community funds, and he didn't have the suspicion of temptation. We're saying that the Midrash quotes the Torah, which says, "Lo kain avdi Moshe b'chol beisi ne'amonhu." In my whole house, like in the whole world, Moshe is the most faithful person. Now let's be honest. Even if I would do tax avoidance or tax evasion, maybe I could cheat the tax authorities, but I can't cheat God. So if God says about Moshe, he's the most faithful, he's the most honest, we don't need to doubt God. He knows what's in our thoughts and everything like that. Now here's where this gets complicated, because it's all great so far and it's all good. The problem is that in the reckoning, the kior, the copper, but basin, the laver and the stand are not mentioned. It's all fine and dandy. He's given this whole massive reckoning. Very strange. No measurements are given for it. Okay, it's just no measurements are given for it at all. So it just, even when it's the commandment to make it, it's not being given with the measurements. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, who passed away in 1270, asks, hey, what's going on? So that's source number 5. V'lo hiskir kan bakan hakior v'hakano, and no mention of this basin, this like sort of like washing facility, is not mentioned. It's made out of copper. Kilo na'aseh b'mishkal, because God, when He commanded the Jewish people in chapter 30 in Kisisa to build it, He never mentioned the size. So this is like getting very strange. And then this is what the Ramban says, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, because today the topic is the Munificent mirrors and the moon. Okay, and he says, Aval kol hamaros sheheviu hanoshim hatzovos shom all the maros, which the women brought, hatsovos, which gathered, perhaps we'll translate it like that, were used to make this copper basin. Okay? V'lo yada Moshe mishkalo, and Moshe had no idea what was donated. So here we've gone from every single penny is accounted for, and then we've got one object in the sanctuary made out of copper. Nobody knows what the measurement's supposed to be, and no reckonings given for it. Problematic? Where does the Ramban get this from? How does he answer it? How does he get it? Where does he get it from? And it's actually at the end of Parshas Vayakel, and it's source 6 on your sheet. And it talks about when they actually made the Kior Nechoshes. And this is where the Ramban gets it from. Source 6. Vayas es ha-Kior Nechoshes. And he made the copper basin, the eskano and its stand, the eskano Nechoshes, and the copper stand, Bamaros hatzovos ashet sovu pesach Ohel Moed. Now, very, very difficult to translate. The first word is maros. Comes from the root mar'er, ra'ah, to see. Maros, according to Rashi, which is source 7 on your sheet, he's written on it miroir, belaz, in old-fashioned French. Who knows what miroir is in French? Mirrors. Okay, so these were made from mirrors. Now, I hope I put this picture on your sheet. Yes, I have. Source 9. Can you see that little picture? I have taken that picture. That is a picture I've taken with my own camera. It's in the British Museum in the Egyptian collection. And I actually went with my children and I never noticed it. And one of my children said, "Mummy," and they were quite young, and they were like, Mum, that's the Rashi on Parshas Vayakel." And I was like, right, okay. No, really, they did say it. And I was like, that is amazing. It's tradition comes alive. Now, obviously, people, they used to look at their reflection in water, or they used to look at their reflection in water. Mirrors weren't made probably until the 1800s, where they had the silver on the back of glass. Glass probably wasn't even a thing until more recently. So certainly in ancient Egypt, we didn't have glass. So how did people have mirrors? They used to take copper and they used to polish it and polish it and polish it and polish it, and then they would be able to see their reflection on it. And there are other pictures of the mirror, and they can see that's quite ornate. You can see if you look at source 9, I don't know if you can see because it's quite small, but there's like a woman. If you can see, it's a figure. You can see two legs and a hand down, maybe with an interesting sort of shaped head, and that is how they had mirrors. And I'm telling you, it was the most exciting thing in the whole wide world. But what on earth does that mean? The mirrors had sovos. Now the word Sadi Beis Aleph comes from the same root as Tzava, the army. Also, Tzavakot is one of the names of Hashem, the hosts, army, legions. What on earth does this mean? It was made from the mirrors, the seers, those who see. It's very difficult to translate. The grammar there is very, very difficult, which I translated it in the Hebrew by translating it in the Hebrew. But Rashi is enlightening us, and he tells us it's got something to do with mirrors. And Rashi carries on and explains to us and tells us a midrash, a most fascinating midrash about the women. I can see some people nodding their head. I hope that means you know the midrash. Do you know the midrash? Well, that's even more exciting because you're going to find out about it.
We're interested in what you're saying.
Okay, the midrash. Okay, this is what Rashi says. You can look it up for yourself because it's just absolutely fascinating. It's actually in Parshas Vayakel. And he says, Benos Yisrael, I love telling stories, and this is just the most unbelievable story. And the story is like almost every story is linked to a close reading of the text. What does it mean? The mirrors, it was made by the women who gathered, from the mirrors of the women who gathered. What does it mean? And why, we're answering two questions. Why is there no measurement given for the kior and for the basin and the laver? Why are they not encountered in the reckoning? Why are they not bringing?
Is that because they had so much, or too much, that God made sure that it all could be used?
It was all used. But can you imagine if it was shiny mirrors? It must have been dazzling. Must have been, maybe they melted it down and they built it, or maybe it was like all the mirrors were there. Let's hear the story, okay? This is a midrash. Again, it's not supposed to be taken literally, but the idea is supposed to tell us how unbelievable and how people wanted to participate in the building of the Mishkan in any way that they could. Source 8. Benos Yisrael hayu b'yodon maros sheraos bahem Kshehem mishtachtos. The Israelite women possessed mirrors of copper into which they used to look. They used to adorn themselves. They could look at themselves in the mirror. Va'af oson lo ikfu melahavi lendivas hamishkan. And even their precious mirrors, they didn't hold back and they didn't prevent themselves from donating to the Mishkan. This is like the most beautiful midrash that the women wanted to participate and they gave up their prized possessions. V'haya mo'es Moshe. Moshe was not happy about this because he's thinking to himself, do I really want your makeup mirror? No. We are building the Mishkan. The Mishkan is for the presence of God. And we don't need, I don't need to be thinking about you putting on your mascara. That's not what I want. That's not what is the right atmosphere for the Mishkan. Mipnei she'asuyim liyetzer hara. Because in his mind, he said, well, what do people use mirrors for? They want to make themselves beautiful and they're attractive and they want to attract people. And Moshe said, it's for the yetzer hara, it's for the evil inclination. Omar lo HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem said to Moshe, Kabel, accept them. Ki elu chavivin olai min hakol. These mirrors, these precious possessions are so precious to me, they are worth everything to me. She'al yedehem he'emidu hanoshim sevaos rabos b'mitzrayim. Because through these mirrors, because it says in the Pasuk, it says, Bamaros hatzovos, with the mirrors of those who gathered, or of those who made legions, made hosts, made troops of people. Sava is an army. What on earth could this possibly mean? Now, there's also a Midrash Tanchuma on Parshas Pikudei, and the rabbis are telling us something. Now, whilst the people, this is very good because we're in the run-up to Pesach, if I'm allowed to say the P word, when the Jews were working in Egypt, they weren't just working, they were working with emotional torture as well. Men were given women's jobs, women were given men's jobs. If you told me that you were very good at cooking, I would put you anywhere but the kitchen. I'd put you somewhere which was not with your skill sets. I'd put you somewhere completely differently. And they also made people work day shifts and night shifts so that men and women could not be together. And therefore nobody could have children, because if you were so tired, they had no hope. But the women did have hope, and I just think this is just so incredible. And they say that the harsh labor was so harsh that Pharaoh decreed that they were not allowed to sleep at home at night. So maybe people had to work in the day and people had to work in the night. And there are different midrashim which tell us that the women were like, we have to find a way out of this. We are going to get out of this. There is going to be a redemption, and we are going to do everything we can to keep our husbands' spirits alive, and we are going to make sure that we carry on having children even through this very difficult time. So there's a midrash that let's carry on looking at Rashi. Okay, so 8b, Kishahayu ba'alehem Yegeim be'avodas parech, when their husbands were completely knocked out from working so hard, Hayu holchos umolichim lachem ma'achal umishteh. Their wives would encourage them. They would make them food. They would say, come on, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. We're going to be okay. Uma'achilos osom v'notlos b'maros. And they would give them to drink and give them to eat. And then they would take their mirrors. But before I say that they take their mirrors, there's another midrash which says they would draw water, and when they drew water, God made a miracle that there would be fish in the water, so they would have something to eat, because they were treated as slaves. They would hardly given cordon bleu meals. And they used to look inside the mirror, and they would take a mirror and they would stand there like this and say, aren't I just stunning? Look at you, you're looking fantastic, okay? And they would look in their mirrors, and they would entice their husbands with words, Loma ani no'eh mimcha, I'm gorgeous, you're gorgeous. Mitoch kach mevios leva'alehem lidei ta'ava. They would get their husbands to desire them. V'niz kokos lahem umisabros v'yoldos sham. They got their husbands to sort of get in the mood and say, you know what, we're going to do this. We are going to be together and we are going to have children. And then there's lots of stories, and the Midrash is very, it's very like amazing stories about the children were born and then they had to hide the children, and the children were brought up perhaps hidden under the ground because there's an idea, tachas hatapuach, underneath the fruit orchards, the women gave birth. They couldn't give birth where they would be seen, and they had to hide their babies because of the babies being thrown into the trees, into the sea, into the river Nile. And there's this idea that God himself sent angels to look after the children, and they ate honey and wafers. And there's a midrash when we speak about Oz Yosher, and we say, Zeh Eli va'amvehu, this is my God and I will glorify him. They say the children who were the children of these people said, hey, I recognize that's Hashem. He was the one who saved me when I was, hidden underground. Difficult to understand exactly what this midrash is, but for me, it means that it was so hard and so difficult, but the women did not give up hope. They said, come on, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And even though it was difficult as if it would have been to hide your baby underground and look after him and feed them and manage within whatever else you had to do, the women were so strong. And they had those mirrors, and they came to Moshe and they said to Moshe, here are the mirrors. And Moshe's like, are you having a laugh? I don't want your mirrors. And Hashem said, no, these are the mirrors. The women used these mirrors. These mirrors are so precious because the women didn't give up hope. They were in Egypt. They were oppressed. It looked like it was never going to end, but it was going to end. And they made sure there would be children and there would be a future and they would be saved. I can see already like running out of time, and I've got loads more things to say. And the copper basin was used by the Kohanim, and one of the things the Kohanim had to do was way beyond the today's remit is the Isha Sota, the woman who was accused of adultery, and she had to drink the bitter waters. If you want to look it up another time. It's in Parshas also. So the mirrors that the women used to build this copper basin and laver was used so that it was later on used to serve as for promoting peace between a man and his wife, even if a man would suggest that she had committed adultery. I think that is a really powerful message. I think it's very strange, but I think that at a time of real difficulty and challenge, some people had so much courage and they wanted to do everything they can to keep going. And I think not everybody's so strong. I wish I would be so strong when things are not going so well. I think there's this idea of there always is hope. And these women who are going through such a hard time, they had hope, and they took even their mirrors, and the mirrors that they used, their precious mirrors, they didn't hold back, and they wanted to donate to the Mishkan. Okay, I'm just going to stop there if anybody wants to say something, and then I'm going to move on to a related but slightly different topic.
So
Louise.
What would have been the use of the mirrors in the Mishkan? What was the purpose of them taking them? I know it was their worldly possession, something they treasured very much.
But copper, it's a valuable commodity.
They'd melt it down.
They'd melt it down, or perhaps not. They used it to, everything was made out of gold, silver. There were silver sockets, and we know what everything was made out of. That we don't know, some things we don't exactly know what it means. For example, let's say when they had tcheles or argamon, tcheles they say is from a snail. What exactly was the blue dye? We don't know exactly what that is, but we know what copper, silver, it's mentioned in the Torah. Okay, so here we see that the women were so lovely and were so willing to donate their precious objects. And I'd like to contrast that with the behaviour of the women at the golden calf, because when they were building the golden calf, the women were not so happy to join in and give up their lovely possessions. So let's take our minds, go a little bit back to the golden calf in Parshas Ki Sisa. And this is source 10 on your sheet. And let's just set the scene. Moshe has gone up. He's 40 days up, 40 days and 40 nights there, waiting for the people to come down, and he's not down. They slightly miscalculated, 6th hour of the day, he's coming down, and the people come and say, we need Moshe, we need a leader, we need this. Now Aharon, according to most opinions, was like, how am I going to handle this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell people to get me their jewellery, bring their jewellery and their wives' jewellery, and that will delay them, and by the time they get back to me, they'll be, by the time they get back to me, things will calm down. Moshe will be back and we'll all be okay. But it wasn't. They did it very, very quickly. Okay, so source 10. Okay, verse.
They do it quickly because the women wouldn't give their.
But that's
gold.
it.
They
That's
would
so.
not list.
Okay, so look what happens. Okay, so Aaron said to them. So this is like they're waiting to come down. Posuk base. Vayomer alehem Aaron, and Aaron said to them, Parku nizmei hazahav asher ba'oznei neshechem v'nechem uvenosechem. Verse 2. Aaron said to them, take the golden rings which are in the ears of your wives and of your sons and of your daughters and bring them to me. He gave them like an mission impossible, an initiative test. And right, and look what the next pasuk says. Vayis parku kol ha'om es nizmei hazahav asher ba'oznehem. And all the people, referring to the men, took out the golden earrings that they had in their ears. Interesting that men had earrings.
Yeah.
Definitely women had nose rings.
They had holes in their ears.
They obviously did,
Yeah,
according to this.
because I think now there's some very ultra-Orthodox women who won't put holes in their ears.
I don't know whether it had holes. Whatever it is, some gold ornament that was in the ears. I think it says Ba'oz Nehem in your ears. Definitely, Rivka had nose rings. We know. Vayoviu el Aharon. This is the really interesting thing in that posuk. It says he tells them, go to your wives, your daughters, and your sons, and get me their jewelry, right? But when the next verse it says they took the gold jewelry that was in their own ears. But not in it doesn't say their wives and their sons. So why do we have the verse before it says women and children, but then the next verse it says from your own ears? So Rashi on that posuk, source 11, Aaron said to himself, women and children love their ornaments. They love their jewelries. Hopefully they're going to be delayed because they won't give anything up. And in the meantime, Moshe is going to come. Next posuk. Was that next posuk? No. So we see that it was that the women did not want to give up their jewelry. So we're thinking to ourselves, hey, they're not really very generous. When it comes to the Mishkan, they're being uber generous. Okay, a little bit of a strange thing going on there because the women did not want to join in. They didn't want to join in with the golden calf because it was idol worship. When it came to bringing in objects for the Mishkan, this is Shelmos Lamed Hey Kaf Beis, we have a very strange language. Vayovo'u ha'anoshim al hanoshim. And the word al means on. So it's not before, with, after, it's just on. And so it's very difficult to translate that. So it could mean they came with the women or following the women, but the word on doesn't make very much sense there. So they gave things, look at source 12, they gave bracelets, nose rings, pendants, gold objects of all kinds. Now Rabbeinu Bechaye asks, what does it mean the men came al hanoshim, on the women? Very strange expression. And he says, it demonstrates that the women came first. When it came to donating to the Mishkan, they were first. Now, I like his what's it called, stereotypical nature of women in a second coming up. A warning alert, okay? Demonstrates that the women came first, and when the men arrived, they found that the women had already preceded them. It is a remarkable tribute to Jewish women. This is an exceptionally high level because the women had not been willing to give up their jewelry to help in the episode of the golden calf, which we just discussed a minute ago. The Torah in the second verse doesn't refer to the ears of the women as they were not willing to pull out their earrings, which we said before. That's what Rabbeinu Bechaye says. Part 2. Now that the donations requested were for the building of the Mishkan, the women wanted to give their gold jewelry enthusiastically. It is more natural, 13b, for women to enjoy and have pleasure from their jewelry, as they are something precious and they bring joy. But the women brought nose rings, pendants, and gold objects. They, the women, preceded the men in their participation of this mitzvah. So when it came to the Mishkan, the women were very willing. They gave it up quickly. When it came to the golden calf, they did not want to give it up quickly. And we can see that the women, when it came to donating their mirrors, even their prized possessions, their own personal mirror, they gave it up. And look what it says in source 13. This is carrying on from Rabbeinu Bechaye. And he's quoting a midrash in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and he says, and I'd like to tie this in because tonight is going to be Rosh Chodesh Adar, so it's 2 weeks to Purim, basically, almost. And we are told that Hashem rewarded the woman both in this world and in the world to come, and because the Mishkan was dedicated on the first day of Nisan. Mishkan dedication day is on the Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Nisan. Women observe Rosh Chodesh more than men, and in the world to come, and in the future, like now, and in the world to come, and in the future they will renew like Rosh Chodesh. I don't exactly know what in the future, in the world to come means, but it's quite a nice thing to say that, to link the idea that women were so forthcoming, and because of the fact they did not participate in the golden calf, but they did participate in the giving of their precious possessions to the Mishkan, they are rewarded with a special mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. The first commandment we are given as a nation is Rosh Chodesh, and that is in Parshas Bo, which is source 14. HaChodesh hazeh yelachem Rosh Chodashim, Rishon hu lachem Roshei Hashanah. That you have to count the years in months, and I think it was Rabbi Kimchi who said, people measure time differently. If anybody is an accountant, you're an accountant?
Yeah.
So when does your life start?
Yeah.
Sorry?
When does it start?
Yeah. So
When I finished all my tax returns.
that's right. So you're basically,
February.
so therefore that's why you could come out now in March, right? Basically. So why is it that the fiscal year starts in England on the 5th of April? Why is it the academic year starts in September? Think about it. Why is that? It's so strange because you measure time by what's important to you or something like that. What is meaningful in your life? Of course, accountants is classic. When Sheva and Johnny got married, we wanted them to get married. David's like, any time, not January. He was like, literally like, I can't live in January. It has to be like, either like December, it's finished, so I can have January. Yeah, definitely, still December. Sorry?
27th December?
I don't know, I can't remember.
You're allowed to read off over
I think it was like the middle of December.
before the new year. It's just
So you can't-
to rebuild your stamina for the January.
Okay, so you get what I mean, but people count time differently.
Isn't it also that Rosh Chodesh was the first mitzvah because if life should start from an organised place?
I love that idea.
I read something.
I love that idea. Now the idea is women are not supposed to work on Rosh Chodesh, okay? And it's perhaps that people were supposed to make it in almost like a mini holiday always. And we have, if you look at source 15, the Gemara Megillah tells us that we cannot prolong the prayer service, so we only have on Mondays and Thursdays 3 aliyahs, so we only have 3 people called up to Torah. But we could have 4 on Rosh Chodesh because no one's in a rush to get to work, because we don't have to work on Rosh Chodesh. And the Rashi there says, She'ein hanoshim osios melacha bahem. Women do not work then. So I was going to make you little handouts and laminate them to take it and stick it on the fridge and say, but you don't have to not work. You just have, no one can force you not to work, but you don't have to work. Some women don't work at all. Other people just abstain from tedious household work. And some people don't do laundry or sewing. But for me, the idea of not doing the laundry and then thinking that I've got to do it the day after is much worse. And, so it's whatever. But it's really, really interesting. Some communities, people wear special clothes on Rosh Chodesh. Some people have Rosh Chodesh lunch. Some people have Rosh Chodesh learning. They do something special to mark Rosh Chodesh. And this is source 17. Tosfos on the Megillah, 22b, but the women are forbidden to work on Rosh Chodesh because they did not pull off their nose rings at the episode of the golden calf. So we're linking again the golden calf and the fact that it wasn't because they weren't generous, it was because they didn't want to participate in idolatry.
Do you know of anybody where the man will say to the wife on Rosh Chodesh, I'm making dinner, I'm serving dinner,
I can't say that I do, but I have heard that. Some people are like, no
I
one.
have a cousin, her husband, on Shabbos, he's the one who serves all the food and clears up because he says that's her work during the week, therefore it's not her Shabbos if she does it on Shabbos.
Nice. Oh, that's nice.
Very nice.
It's just the first thing they do on everyday work.
That's a first.
And he's the only one I know.
Can't can't be a Sephardi household.
I was going to
No,
say,
you
and you must be very organised.
You're very-
Blimey.
Well, there is an idea. I just showed you the source for it. Okay.
But you're supposed to refrain from your everyday work. I don't know.
But some people don't actually. Some people might not actually go to work if you're, whatever your job is. You don't. Some people don't do household chores. But people do that. There was a teacher who has been in. His name was Mr. Pozon. He passed away. He used to wear a red shirt. He wore a red shirt to make it special, to show Rosh Chodesh when it is, to make it stand out. But what I want to talk about is women and Rosh Chodesh in general, and that perhaps the connection between women and Rosh Chodesh is the cycle of the moon, and that our lives are run by cycle and menstrual cycle. But the fact that the moon waxes and wanes is something for us to think about, that in our own lives, there can be difficult times like they had in Egypt, really harsh times where you can't even see the moon, there's no light, but things get better. And there's always that hope that things, sometimes it can be hard. Life is waxing and waning. We have ups and we have downs. The festivals, Shana is a year. L'shanot is to repeat around and around and around. The earth moves around the sun. It's a cycle, but we're also in a spiral. We're hopefully going to move on and up a stage. But the moon gives us this idea of, I'm going through a difficult patch, but there is going to be a full moon. I know it's going to wane again, but there are going to be times in our lives that are more challenging and a little bit easier for us. And just before Shema, we say in the part which is Yotze Or, we say Uvatuvo Machadesh B'chol Yom Talmid Maaseh Bereshis. In His goodness, Hashem renews each and every day the creation, creates the world anew. Every day you've got the opportunity, a new leaf, turning over a new page. And just to sort of remember the things we spoke about today, we started off talking about the accounting of the Mishkan and about the fact that Moshe didn't want to have personal accountability. He wanted to be audited. He wanted someone. If someone's in charge of community funds, the fact that the women wanted to donate their mirrors and Moshe said, don't want it. And Hashem said, no, that's what I want. It's very, very, very precious to me. And I hope that when it comes to it, if we need to ever donate to, especially to the Ukraine or other very important causes, we won't be holding back our precious possessions. But I don't think they'll want our